First of all, fair warning, this video is going to be slightly rambly and slightly tangenty, so if that's really not your thing, then you are free to go. You won't offend me or anything like that. This is just me dumping my opinions onto the internet, so if that ain't your thing, no hard feelings. You're free to click off now. You have been warned. So, yes, hi guys. Welcome to another topic video that I wanted to talk about for a very long time. And before I get started, I do want to talk about the art for anybody who cares, as in the 1% that actually cares what I'm drawing while I'm talking in these videos. So if you do care about that, just stick around for a minute. And if you don't, I'll put a timestamp on the screen for the part you can skip to just get to the good stuff. And if, of course, you are liking the art and you just want to see the art process slowed down a little bit more and not hear me talk, I'll put little thing on the top corner of the screen so you can go watch just the art process with some music. So yeah, with that out of the way, the artwork I'm doing is I have, for anyone who isn't already aware, because we talk about this all the time, me and my good buddy Twisted Disaster, go check her out on YouTube and DeviantArt and all that good stuff. Me and my good buddy Twisted Disaster, we've had this roleplay going on every day since about sometime mid-December of last year, of course, and it's been super fun and it's just been a great time. It's actually helped us both develop our stories more, and especially particularly me, hers is a lot more fleshed out than mine, but it started with a whole like, she made a joke of her character saying something, I made a joke response, and the joke hasn't stopped yet, so we haven't quite found the punchline. But yeah, so it's been really fun and it's just been great, and I felt like it would be the perfect kind of video to actually talk about this with, because everything considered. But yeah, so I basically just decided, because since this is about the time that it started, why not torture myself and draw all 23 of our quote unquote next gen kids, of our second gen kids that we have. Which we actually had a few more that showed up while I was creating these, but I didn't include them because they aren't as important and I'm lazy. So, and 23 was already plenty. So, yeah, and if you want to learn any more about these characters for some reason, I'll put links to all the finished images in the description. So, you can go read about them and all that stuff. And if you don't care, that's all good too. So, yeah, that's the whole thing behind the artwork. And with that out of the way, let's just get to what you all came here to listen to. So, I've wanted to talk about this kind of thing in a video for a long time, and of course, like I said, this felt like a perfect opportunity to do it. And I know most people, they'll talk about this in relation to specifically art, specifically drawing. Like, there's people, I've seen plenty of videos where people talk about this in relation to, like, take some time to not do commissions and do your own artwork and stuff, which is also very, very important advice. But I wanted to talk about this more directly in relation to writing stories, because to me, it's advice that I feel like more people need to hear, especially younger people trying to create something great of a story, whether it's a video game or a movie or a comic or whatever. And I feel like they need to hear this, and nobody ever says this kind of thing enough, and instead they kind of make it feel like it's the opposite. But so yeah, I will be talking in this video in more relation to having fun with your stories and with your characters, because that's what I'm really passionate about, as well as art. So you can imply this. Oh dear. Sorry, I flicked my headphones, but I will be. This advice could definitely be applied to artwork and other fields of pretty much mostly anything. And that's just because I'd like to think, especially the advice I have at the end, is just kind of valuable. So yeah, with that out of the way, I'll stop rambling and we'll just get to it. So yeah, I feel like, to start off, I feel like I find a lot of users and creators online who become so focused on creating a big important story that they can monetize and that they can have be famous, like creating the next Harry Potter or the next Lord of the Rings, that they forget to have fun with making stories and have fun with what they're doing. And if you take everything too seriously, I believe that you lose something very valuable in the creative process. And I'll talk a little bit more about taking things too seriously in a second. But I do believe that there are a lot of story creators who really lose the idea of actually just having fun, and they seem to beat themselves up for wanting to have fun a little too much sometimes. So I mean, as an example of this, I often, like, whenever I do videos where or live streams, whatever, where people can ask me questions and stuff, one question I get asked very, very often, or a few different questions I get asked very often, are things along the vein of, do I have too many characters, or is it wrong if I want to scrap or change something? And my answer is always just no. If you actually, now, okay, if you are actually in the middle of making a story of a big project, like a monetized comic that is already being uploaded with a schedule, or if you're writing a book you plan to have finished by the end of the year, you should probably have a little bit more focused and not a little more focus on those projects and not get too carried away with other things. But that's a different scenario. I'm more talking about people who aren't yet publishing something, who aren't yet making a story finalized, and I'm also talking about the stories that are not finalized or won't be finalized anytime soon. But even in that case, you can't really have too many ideas to work with, and it's never wrong to scrap or start a story over if it's not already being produced. And you shouldn't let anyone guilt you into thinking that it somehow is. If you have an idea you want to explore, do it. Don't hold yourself back. And that goes the same for if you have a character and you feel like the character's just not working out, or you feel like having a change to it could make it better, then change it, And I mean, obviously, if the character's already in a thing you're doing, don't change them halfway through the story. But if it's a story you're still just working on, then no, don't be afraid to change something if you feel like it would be better for one reason or another, You shouldn't be afraid of that. Or if you're just working with an idea and it's just not working, don't be afraid to just kind of put it to the side and move on to something else. There isn't shame in that. Something I have noticed is that I see people who seem to get very caught up in seeing the big final projects of other creators, that they don't realize that most great story writers have tons of ideas they have scrapped, or ideas they never plan to publicize, or ideas that'll never see the light of day. And people don't see that part. And so they become so enraptured with, like, the Lord of the Rings and stuff like that, that they don't realize that the people who contribute to that kind of stuff, or people who make stories like that probably wasn't their first story they've ever made. The creative process is truly one filled with broken eggs and experiments all over the floor and all over the kitchen, because that's how creativity works. I mean, hell, if you are a follower of me and you know some of my online stories, you might know like one or two of them. You might know probably Luniverse, and you might know Seven Sins and a Baby, and maybe one or two obscure ones that I haven't worked on too much recently. But believe me, I have about 20 or something story ideas that are alive in my head that I still work with when I feel the urge to, and that's not even including all the ideas that I've just kind of let fade into history, which is probably going to make that number about like 30. I mean, I could go into my own 30-minute video just talking about every story idea I've ever had, and I'd probably forget something too, because that's just how it goes. There are very few people in the world that can just stay hyper focused on one story all the time. And honestly, that's not always good, because you become a little bit too trapped into that story, and it can kind of blind you to different ideas and different roads you can take with that story. And, sometimes having just one story and never letting yourself make anything else can be bad for that story in in the long run. There's actually something very valuable about coming up with random ideas, with random characters, with random stories, because you can learn something from every story and every character. You can take something from those experiments, whether those stories see the light of day or if they were just a one day thing that you get bored of in an hour. It can tell you, it can let you, for one thing, it can let you figure out things about yourself. What kind of things you're good at writing, what things you enjoy writing, the kind of style of writing you want, what maybe you need to get better at. It can show you what ideas you like, what you don't like, what works and what doesn't work. You can discover what you want to apply to something else. Like, you might figure out, man, this is a cute kind of little like dynamic that I have in this one little made up story I did. I kind of want to apply that to this other story I have. It can teach you about developing characters. You can experiment with weird ideas. You can learn from your own mistakes. In fact, the best kinds of stories to do that sort of stuff with are ones you don't plan to ever publicize, because it's free of outside bias or standards, and it's free for you to really see how far you can go with a crazy idea without having any kind of subjective outside opinion. And obviously you have to think about that if you decide, hey, I like the story enough, I want to publicize. You do need to think about a little bit of how you're going to make money with that. You can't, there are some standards you need to listen to, and you always need to be open to criticism if you ever intend for your story to get outside of anywhere than other just yourself. You need to be ready to hear outside criticism, but that's a different story altogether. Although, on that note, don't be afraid to imagine your characters in other scenarios and situations. You can see right now what I'm drawing are characters from a roleplay my friend and I did, where we imagined what would happen if our stories crossed paths. Not only has that helped us discover more about our own stories outside of the roleplay, but it has given us so much enjoyment and just stupid fun. Obviously, a lot of this stuff isn't going to become canon in most of our stories because it either physically can't because of how our stories are structured, or it's just there's no way to fluidly fit it in. And we know we won't use half these characters again. I mean, Gabriel, for example, is a really good example. He'll be the blue one with the ponytail, who's a guy wearing purple. He has brought some of our most dumb fun, and we can't use him for either of our canons just because he would either totally hijack our stories, like in my case, because he could exist in my story, hypothetically, but he would totally hijack my story. And in Twisted Disasters, it would just entirely break the canon. And if she were to change him to fit the canon, it just wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't be Gabriel, And but who cares? Because right now it's fun. He's a fun character to write. He's created interesting conflict and stories in our little mindless roleplay adventures. It's fun for us, and that's something some people really need to have, and not feel like they can't just have that stupid fun. There's a reason that Marvel and DC Comics have random alternate universes outside of the main stories. There's a reason some stories have little crossover adventures sometimes. There's a reason that some stories will go into will have little spin-offs and one-offs about the backstory of a random character. There's a reason people love fan fiction or fan-made content, because that stuff is fun and it's different, and it's like an exercise for your brain to just go for it and see how far you can run with how much you can imagine of something, and just see where you can go, without the limits of something canonical and already structured. And another thing I would like to say that is very important is, don't be afraid to do things that seem to quote-unquote break rules with storytelling. Now, yes, you should know how creative rules or standards work with stories, and you should have an idea of what people enjoy and what people look for in stories. But once you do, you should never be afraid to break those rules. Some people online can lead creators to falsely believe that you can't do certain things with your stories ever because it's somehow banned or it's somehow not good. And inherently not good, I should say. But that's simply not the case. There are exceptions for everything, and it all depends how you really work with it. Now, yes, of course, there are some ideas that, you might kind of be limited, like with source material, or there might just be an idea where you can only really make it so good before publicly people don't tend to, the masses don't tend to enjoy it. But even then, it still shouldn't make you feel like you can't do something. Even if it sounds like a stupid idea on paper, you can execute it well. Almost any idea can be executed well. And there's plenty of stories that I get sad whenever they're bad because I'm like, this could have been done so well and it wasn't. That's how ideas work. And if you're just doing something for fun and to experiment with, you don't plan to try and make it famous. You don't plan uh, to publicize it, whatever. Then even more reason to take a sledgehammer to those rules, to those things. I mean, I'll use Gabriel as an example again. His whole character is that he is super powerful and can do the impossible constantly. That was at least his frame, his starting point, his base. Most people would look at that just as a basic character and not including the other elements of his personality and story things that have happened. And they would just look at that basic concept of his character and say, well, that's not going to make a good story because he's too powerful. But that's not the case. It really is not, isn't. Because, well, why? Because it's entertaining. And that's something that I think a lot of people forget about stories is the fact that it's not about rules. It's about, did it bring amusement to someone? Did it entertain someone? Did it accomplish the goal that it had? He creates interesting stories in the little world we've created. He creates fun dialogue. He creates interesting dynamics, things like that. Other characters interacting with him and him interacting with other characters is interesting, which is why we keep using him and how he keeps coming. He's one of the characters that seems to like to have the spotlight a lot in what we do. And of course, that's fun. He's so fun to write for us. He's so fun to interact with us, especially he has been in the past too. And that's what it's about. We're not planning to put him out in front of everybody and like care about whether or not they think he's overpowered. We're just having fun. And now again, obviously, if you want to publish something, you need to be more aware of what people want. But by God, if you just want to make a character just for the fun of it, just do what you enjoy and have some stupid fun with it. Now, you shouldn't yell at people or attack them because they don't like what you do. And if somebody criticizes you, you shouldn't go after them because how dare they criticize what you're doing for fun. But just remember that what you're doing is you're doing for your own enjoyment, and you don't need to let people get too much into your head, At the end of the day, you're writing a fictional character running in a fictional world, and we shouldn't take that kind of thing as seriously as we do sometimes. And I mean that on both the creator and the consumer side of things. And that is honestly my main message of this very rambly advice video. And that's, I think we all need to not take these fictional stories so seriously as we do sometimes. I've seen people get emotionally distressed over fictional stories, over fictional universes, and treat them like more than they really are. Now, sometimes there are some stories that can have real life consequences, and those should be talked about. But we should not let these fictional stories make us emotionally distressed or ruin our day or ruin our mood, because at the end of the day, that's all fictional. It's all pretend. It's a game, And I think there's just a lot of people who take stories a little bit too seriously sometimes. They become so focused on on making something big, on making something extravagant, or even some people just take stories too seriously. They become too attached to, too emotionally invested in something they shouldn't, to where it really actually affects their life, and that's not healthy. And I think we all just need to know that not only do we as creators need to just learn to have fun and understand that these stories are fictional and we should be allowed to have fun with something fictional that is not real and not hurting somebody. And we should also, as consumers, understand that these are fictional characters and there's no reason to feel so personally attacked when someone dares add their own creative input to something, to feel so personally offended by, it's just, it's there's no reason to get that emotionally invested in a fictional story. And I think that's something we need to hear a lot more, just all of us. If anyone can take anything from this rambling whatever video this is, it's just that don't let these fictional stories ruin your life, and don't let them consume your being. Don't ever hurt yourself mentally or physically over a story, and don't hurt other people over something fictional. Because don't attack somebody for a fictional story. Don't try and attack someone both physically and verbally just over a fictional story or a fictional character. And don't let yourself be consumed by something that isn't real. Because again, while at the end of the day we should have fun with our stories, we should also remember that everyone else is having fun with every other story in the world. And when real life consequences do get involved in a story, then yes, that is important to discuss. But if we're just talking about some dumb fun or some people doing their own thing online, I think we just sometimes we just need to learn when people are having fun and when we should maybe just move on with our day, if you understand what I mean. But with that being said, I'd love to hear what you think. You're free to share your own thoughts and adventures down below. You're free to talk. You can be free to point out all the parts where I didn't make any sense because I'm just rambling, getting my thoughts out. And I hope this helped somebody out there free their creativity a little bit and feel less restricted in what they're doing. And just remember that no matter what you do, whether it's art, whether it's stories, whether it's anything, just remember to have some fun sometimes and take care of your own happiness, because that's really what's most important. Stories aren't always made to make some big stance on something. Most stories in the world are just made so we can feel happy and entertained sometimes. So just remember to do that for yourself, no matter what you're doing, whether it's stories or otherwise. So, just take some time to enjoy it. And you know what I definitely enjoy? Doing Patreon shoutouts. That's what. First, I want to say to my $2 tier plus patrons, I love you too. Thank you for your support. But I want to give a high five to Isabel GD, Gun Moon, and Mick. And last but certainly not least, you know whose power levels are over $9. Pythoness, Hayden's Art, Twisted Disaster, Jago, FEMA, and of course Skyak too. Thank you guys so much for the support. I'm so glad you could support what I do and that for some reason you're still sticking around and giving me money. And of course, if any of you all out there want to join my Patreon, there will be links in the description below. But with that out of the way, I hope you enjoyed this video and I will see you in the next one. Whatever it may be, Zodiac